Greetings, happy warriors, and welcome to the Rabbi Daniel Lapin Show, where I, your rabbi, reveal how the world really works. Great to have you on the show, and thank you for your participation in the show, and thank you for all you do in spreading the word of the show to like-minded people who'd enjoy it and find meaning in it just as you do. And thank you also for subscribing to the show. Very much appreciate all the people who've done that, and our rising subscriber numbers turn out to be a very helpful feature for me. The name of the show, the title of the show, Faith Over Fear, How to Prosper When Everyone Else Panics. And there's a lot of reasons why people are panicking. They're panicking over the economy, they're panicking and have been panicking over war, they panicked over the election of Donald Trump in the United States of America, they panic over the climate change and the rising sea levels, and they panic and fear things like declining health and real problems of declining fertility. All of these things cause fear, and we know that children raised in these ordinary environments turn out to suffer disproportionate levels of anxiety when compared to children in other periods. So here we are midway through the year 2025, and it's not that unusual from the year 1025 or the year 1225 or the year 725 as Islam was getting going. The point is that there is always a variety of fears that are able to engage our subconscious. There really is seldom any shortage. And as a matter of fact, a challenge would be go ahead and see if you can find a period in history where you could say, I wish I lived in that period of history. At least I wouldn't suffer from any fears at all. I think you're going to find considerable difficulty in finding any such period because fear is a natural default of the human condition. If you like, fear is actually a triumph of the animal inside of us. What do I mean by that? Well, some of you probably already twigged onto that. What happens is that if you watch animals, whether you watch wild animals in Africa, as I've been privileged to do, or you watch birds in the park, or you watch raccoons in the yard at nightfall, by and large, the natural instinct of animals is to flee. If there is any sudden movement, they dash away. Any noise, they dash off in terror. Anything at all makes animals fearful, and they flee. If they have no option, they'll fight, and that's the whole fight or flee discussion. But by and large, overwhelmingly, even snakes, given a choice, will move away from anything unknown, anything that changes their status quo. A shadow falls across them, off they go. A rustle in the grass, a noise, off they go, they're gone. And it's a very natural, animalistic phenomenon. That's what animals do. However, people who are making no conscious effort to rise above their animal natures will find themselves reacting in exactly the same way, because for heaven knows, there is certainly enough to find around one to be frightened of, just like animals. Animals are constantly looking around warily for the next potential danger showing up in the vicinity. That's what they do. So human beings who do the same thing, we are surrendering to our animal instinct. And it's obviously difficult and it's problematic. It makes life less enjoyable. And even more seriously, it is a handicap. It's a brake exerting resistance to everything you would like to achieve. Overcoming fear is for many of us the first step number one in self-improvement. And there's a lot to be said for that. But before I say the lot that is to be said for that, I should also mention that we have just made available a free download of one of our most successful and popular programs. It's called Boost Your Income, 3 Spiritual Strategies for Success. And what's great about that is because while it wouldn't take us more than a few seconds to come up with 3 things that we could do that would damage our lives and reduce our likelihood of success and bring about sorrow and sadness, easy to think of 3 things like that. But to think of 3 things that you could do right now that would have exactly the opposite effect, that would transform important aspects of your life in a positive direction, your family, your faith, your friendships, your finances, even your physical health, your fitness, something that would dramatically improve those things. How many of you could quickly think of 3 things to do? Well, if you can't, don't worry, because all you have to do is download the free ebook, Boost Your Income, 3 Spiritual Strategies for Success, and away you go. You've got it. It's yours. You can do that right after the show. And to do that, just go to wehappywarriors.com, the website wehappywarriors.com, and you will find a way there to get your free ebook, free download of a terrific product, Boost Your Income, 3 Spiritual Strategies for Success. So don't hesitate to go for that. Now, there is also something else we've got available, and that is a depiction of everything that there is to understand in practical and contemporary terms about Noah and the flood. That whole Bible story is not merely a myth and a legend. No, that story is filled with information that changes the way we look at things. Allow me perhaps to give you an example that I think you will really enjoy. In the gathering storm, during the storm and the flood, there's a point at which God instructs Noah to enter the ark. And then in Genesis chapter 7, verse 13, we read that Noah did, in fact, enter the ark. But the wording is, on that self-same day. Now, that is a translation that was adopted hundreds of years ago as the Bible began to be translated into English. But the Hebrew does not say on the self-same day. The Hebrew word is be'etzem hayom hazeh, and what that literally means is on the bone of that day. Now, in order to understand that, we have to understand that the Hebrew word for independence, independent strength, is atzma'ut. I don't know if you can hear the word etzem in the first part of the word atzma'ut. The voweling changes, but vowels are insignificant in Hebrew. And there's a reason for that, and that belongs to another discussion. But for now, what we have is this idea that a bone provides independence and strength. What would we look like if we didn't have bones? We'd be blobs of jelly. We'd be like a jellyfish. Bones give us shape. Bones allow us to stand upright, and bones allow us to stare our adversary in the eye and clarify that we are not surrendering. Bones allow you to stand up straight. And so on the bone of that day is the Bible's way of telling us that something was going on that required Noah to draw upon all his inner reserves of strength and courage. And what was that? Well, ancient Jewish wisdom records that during the building of the ark, which took 120 years, it took a long time. During that time, and not surprisingly, for one man and his 3 sons to build a boat the size of a small freighter, he didn't have power tools, he didn't have gantries and cranes. So it took a long time. During that period of time, people passed by and they'd ask him, what are you doing? And he said, well, because of the evil, God's going to bring a flood, and this is how I and my family are going to survive. And people always had the same response, which, when you think about it, is the response of mean and thuggish people. They said to him, look, we don't believe you that God's going to bring a flood, and we're not terribly worried about it. But this we will tell you, that if perchance there should be a flood, and you try and save yourself by going into that ark, we will prevent that from happening by any means necessary. Please don't think that if there is a flood, you're going to survive by getting in your stupid boat. That's not going to happen. And so when God said, go into the boat now, it turned out to be in the daytime. And Noah said, well, Lord, I just got a couple of things to take care of still. How'd it be if I go in when I'm finished? It'll be about midnight tonight. And God said, no, go in now. Brightness of day, just go for it. And that was what on that self-same day, or on the bone of that day, mean. The exertion of courage. And every time you employ courage in facing down a fear that you have, you become a better person, you become a stronger person, and you become a more courageous person for facing future challenges. But wait, that's not the only time the phrase on that self-same day is used in the Bible. Here's another good one, a good example, and that is Genesis chapter 17, verse 26. Now, this is God telling Abraham to circumcise himself. And again, apparently, according to ancient Jewish wisdom, the locals of that period were very into bodily perfection, a little bit like we are these days. On the covers of magazines, do they put wise, older people, men and women who've lived a few years? No, young, pretty people. And they are people who may have even had a great deal of plastic surgery. And if they haven't had plastic surgery, they have enjoyed photo improvement by means of photoshopping the pictures. So physical perfection is greatly praised in this day and age, certainly in the culture of the United States where I live. But it's certainly equally prevalent in many of the places that I've traveled in. And so, not shockingly, people said to Abraham, what are you getting ready to do? And Abraham said, well, the Lord's instructed me to circumcise myself. And they said, what? Tamper with the perfection of the human body? Absolutely not. Out of the question. We will not allow you to do that. You are violating a cultural norm, and we are going to cancel you in whatever way necessary in order to prevent you not doing that. And God said, okay, Abraham, time now to proceed with the circumcision. And Abraham, very understandably, said to God, well, Lord, how about if I take care of it tonight? There's a lot going on. I've got to finish getting ready, but I'll be ready about 9, 10, 12 tonight. And God said, no, do it in the daytime. Face your fears, stare your adversaries in the eye, and let them get the message that there is no way that they are going to deter you from what you know you have to do. So Abraham goes and does it on that self-same day, or more accurately, on the bone of that day, making sure that the display of courage was going to face down his adversaries, and that's exactly what happened. And finally, let me give you one more example, and this is another case where the Bible uses the phrase on that self-same day. I'm looking at Exodus chapter 12, verse 41, and what we're looking at here is the Israelites getting ready to depart from Egypt. The great famous Exodus is about to take place. Ancient Jewish wisdom tells us that the Egyptians said, look, we know your God has inflicted us with 10 plagues. He's virtually destroyed our country, but here we still are. And we're going to tell you one thing. We know we're destroyed, but if you think you people are going to walk out of here peacefully and just enjoy freedom out of Egypt, not going to happen. We will not allow you to step over the border and leave our country. And so God says, okay, time to leave. And ancient Jewish wisdom reliably reports that the Israelites were a little uncomfortable, and they said to Moses, why don't we go in the nighttime? It's cooler to travel at night. It's easier. The children will be able to be asleep. Let's just postpone the departure till tonight. And through Moses, God says, no, you're going to leave in the brightness of day, showing how fearless you are towards your adversaries. On that same day, the Israelites left Egypt. On the bone of that day, by the visual demonstration of fearless courage. And that is what made all the difference. So I suppose I could put it this way, that fear is the natural condition of animal life. But human beings have the gift of courage, which doesn't come naturally. It's something we have to develop and grow within us. And one of the important things to understand about courage is that the more we practice, the more we actually live courageously, the better equipped we are to deal with fears as they come along, because fears will always be there. It is a natural part of living, and just as every animal has fears, but the only way they have to deal with it is flee or fight. And many times, you know yourself, you mean that animal no harm. You know, there's a deer in the woods. You're on a walk, and there are, I don't know, half a dozen deer grazing peacefully. All of a sudden, their ears perk up, and their heads all swivel to face you, and you're enjoying the sight of these beautiful creatures, and you try and draw a little bit closer to maybe get a good photograph, and all of a sudden, they bound off in apparent terror. You meant them no harm. And that is a reality about fear. When you live by fear, you flee or are frightened or are discomforted by things most of the time are not ever going to harm you. But the natural condition is to react with fear and terror. And so human beings created to rise above nature and to train ourselves to react as we should, not as we instinctively would. Well, little by little, we teach ourselves and our children to grow with courage so as that they are less and less likely to be stampeded into mistaken activities in order to try and make this mental condition we call fear go away. Okay, so what is the problem with fear? Primarily, what fear does in your life is it obstructs your progress. It places a block in the way of what deep in your heart you know you ought to do and perhaps you even want to do. That is the really important thing to understand. Have you ever heard phrases in English literature like, he stood frozen in fear, he was rooted to the spot in terror, he was paralyzed with fear? Those phrases crop up again and again and again because they are true. Fear has the chief ability of paralyzing us. It stops us moving ahead. It stops us doing what we should do. Let me give you an example. This was something I witnessed myself not long ago at a wedding where I was talking to a young man in his mid-20s, and a young man very eager to find a bride and begin his life. And it turned out that there was at the wedding a woman he had met before, casually, just in passing, and she was there. And in the lobby of the celebration hall, there was a period where people were mixing and mingling, and I said to him, "Isn't that her? Isn't that the girl you were talking about?" And his eyes acquired almost a dreamy look, and he said, yes, that's her. I said, great, go up to her now. Just go up to her, introduce herself, remind her of when you met, and ask her if you can take her out for coffee to chat for a little bit. You'd like to talk to her. And he looked at me in stark horror. He was terrified. And it was a mix of things, I think. I did my best to help him overcome it, and I was an utter failure. And pretty soon after that, the participants and celebrants were called into the hall for the celebratory dinner, and she was at a table sitting with her friends far away on the other side of the hall, and he was sitting on my side, and that was it. He missed his opportunity, and there wasn't another that evening. And I tried to ask him, let's analyze, what were you fearful of? And it was almost as if it was hard to put words to it. He was fearful of rejection. What would she say? Well, maybe she'd say to him, I don't like you talking to me in public like this. Or maybe he was worried about what other people would say when they saw him do it. Or maybe he was worried that she'd shoot him down and other people would see that happening. But the bottom line is, he didn't do it. And the worst thing of all is that for the rest of the evening, he looked like a beaten dog, because he knew that he'd missed out on an opportunity to do something maybe wonderful, but he'd missed out on it. And this is perfectly natural and perfectly normal. That is what fear does to us. And that's something that we all have to understand, because in one way or another, that is something that we are all experiencing in our own lives as well. I want to tell you about the structure of the word. Beautiful thing in the Lord's language. The Hebrew word for fear is pachad. And as is the case with so many important words in the Lord's language, when you read it backwards, it yields the opposite meaning. And there is no other language that routinely does this on the face of the earth. About 5,000 languages or dialects. Nothing else does it. But in Hebrew, many important words do that. It was as if in English, G-O-O-D spelt good and D-O-O-G spelt evil, which of course it doesn't in English. But in Hebrew, interestingly enough, the word for fear, when you read it backwards, it is the word to push or propel or drive forward, or to help somebody else move forward, advance, charge forward. That is what the word, the three-letter root for fear, read backwards. And so you immediately get the idea. Fear is the opposite of propulsion and charge and progress and forward movement. That's right, that's exactly what we're saying. Rooted in fear, paralyzed with fear. Fear stops you doing the things that would be valuable and worthwhile to do. Now, I know what some of you are saying right away, which is, well, wait a moment. Wouldn't it be true to also say that fear stops us doing things that we shouldn't do, things that could be harmful and things that could be damage? And you're absolutely right. Of course that is the case. And there are things you want a child, a toddler, to begin to learn, that certain things are dangerous and you should be fearful of them, and that's a good thing. It makes you stay away from them. But those are mostly things that are physically dangerous. The really destructive fear that stops you from doing many, many things you ought to do, that destructive fear is all spiritual. Nothing is going to injure you. Nothing is going to jab you. Nothing is going to give you an electric shock. That's not the things you're fearful of. The things you're fearful of are things that carry no physical peril whatsoever. But nonetheless, you stay away from them, all because of fear. Fear obstructs, blocks, paralyzes, restricts, handicaps, and as such, really, really destructive. And all of these things are spiritual fears. None of the things we're talking about are things you're fearful of, because something is going to injure you. That's not what we're talking about. Everyone recognizes those as healthy instincts. But fear of embarrassment, and it's a very real fear. It's one of the reasons that people are fearful of public speaking, of getting up in front of an audience. Fear of embarrassment. It's a real thing. And I'm certainly not mocking it. I'm certainly not diminishing it. But I am saying that it is very important to get over it. And to be able to say to yourself, if things don't go well, if I do this thing and I try and do it and I don't do well, I'm going to be horribly embarrassed. Maybe you will and maybe you won't. You may feel you're horribly embarrassed, but as you look around and you realize, gosh, you really are not the center of attraction. People are not that interested in everything you're doing. And you feel, yes, well, I made a fool of myself getting up to speak and I wasn't properly prepared. And fine, maybe you did. But for everyone else, it's gone. 10 seconds later, their attentions are on something else entirely. And with you, it lives on and on as an enduring, painful wound of humiliation. And then you're even embarrassed when 3 weeks later you run into somebody who was there that day and heard you make a fool of yourself, and you assume that that event still hangs heavy in his mind. It doesn't. And little by little, you find that you can train yourself to overcome fear of embarrassment, fear of looking foolish, fear of illness, fear of death. Well, there you come a little bit closer to some of the physical fears, and they are real, obviously. But again, courage. If you've built up your courage, or if you were fortunate enough to have parents who built up your courage, just an example of a way of building up courage. Maybe you grabbed a candy when you were a little kid shopping with your mother in the market, and you put it in your mouth, and you're old enough, you're 5 years old, you know you're not supposed to take things. That's called stealing. And your mother now takes you to the store manager, who she hopes is a wise and smart person. And your mother says to the store manager, this is little Johnny, he's my 5-year-old son, and he's come here because he wants to apologize to you for taking something and eating it without paying for it. And, this is just an example. And your mother makes you say to the manager, Mrs. Manager, or whatever it is, I'm sorry, I did this, I won't ever do it again. And a wise manager will play along with your mother and turn it into a learning experience. But what that does, in addition to anything else, is, things of honesty and so on. But what it also does is builds up your bone, builds up your courage. And so if you're lucky enough to have had parents who built your courage little by little as you were a child growing up, giving you opportunities to stand up to things and encouraging you to face your fears, then as an adult, it's so much easier. But what happens if they didn't? Well, then it's up to you now to find opportunities to stretch yourself and to exert your courage, because every time you do it, you're making the courage muscle stronger, just like any other muscle. You exercise it, it becomes better at it. You're not good at balancing. Well, guess what? If you spend 10 minutes every day trying to balance on whether it's a rope or a whatever you're doing, guess what? You get better at it, obviously. And so it is that if you practice courage, you get better at it. There are primal fears, like fears of height, which many people have. So let's say that the only job you are able to get that pays well is servicing wind turbine generators. Those things are on the top of towers that can be 250, 300 foot high. You're talking, you talk about a 30-story building, right? Except it's not a building. It's just a thin, slender tower that probably sways a little bit, I would imagine. And now you've got to go up there and service these things. And you tell yourself, look, I'm strapped in all the time. I'm harnessed, I'm tethered, there's no way I can fall. All I got to do is concentrate on replacing the bearings or lubricating the machine, whatever it is I have to do up there that I'm getting paid to do. And you come down, and you need a de-stress period of 20 minutes of just to get back your normal feelings. But what happens the next day, or the next tower you climb, and the third one? What happens after you've done 20 towers over the last few weeks, and you suddenly begin to realize it's just not worrying you the same as it was before, because you become more capable of dealing with fear every single time you face it. You stand erect with your bone, your entire skeletal structure, and look it in the eye. People are fearful of bad things happening to ones you love. All these are spiritual fears. They are happening inside your imagination. They're happening in your mind. They're happening in your soul. And you say to yourself, well, wait a sec, these things could happen. Yes, of course they could happen. There's no question about it. But that doesn't mean that they are likely to happen. And that is, it's something we have to sort of tell ourselves constantly. But it's important to understand we're talking about spiritual problems. Let me explain to you what I mean. Let us imagine that you are confronted by a robber who intends assaulting you and taking your wallet. Now, if you have a dog with you, your dog will instantly recognize the threat and the fear. And I don't know how dogs do that, but I know that they do. And your dog will recognize your panic, and he will recognize that this thug confronting you is the source of your fear. And if he's a good, strong dog, he will attack your assailant. That is a physical fear, and that's not what we're talking about today. Physical fears, those are usually good signals you should pay attention to. But we're talking about spiritual fears. And you now are walking around weighed down by a big financial fear. Your dog knows you're not happy, because dogs are attuned to the moods of their owners. I don't know how that works. I don't know how they do it, but I do know that they do. But your dog doesn't have a clue of what's bothering you. It's not visible. It's a spiritual fear. It's something being generated in your own soul. Your own imagination is conjuring up worse and worse scenarios of what this fear could actually be doing. And so these are spiritual things, and therefore they can be combated most effectively by spiritual defenses. But let's not make any mistake about this. Spiritual things can and do impact your body. Let's make sure. We must understand this. I'll give you an example. One of them is that people's hair can go white in a matter of days. In other words, if people have a very awful experience, something absolutely terrifying, and they go through a couple of days of sheer horror, they can come out of that with their ordinary brown or black hair having turned white. It does happen. I mean, it sounds crazy. I saw you 3 days ago. You didn't look like this. Why are you so white? Well, you have no idea what's happened to me over the last 3 days. You know what a placebo is, right? Where medical improvement is brought about through a sugar tablet which is completely inert, has absolutely no biological or physiological effect on your body. But these things have been tested again and again and again, and they are a reality. Doctors, particularly doctors who have a good relationship with a patient, are able to bring about change in the patient, remarkable change, simply by means of the assurance that this particular tablet will do the trick. You should be feeling better in a few hours' time. And people do. You may well yourself have been somebody who has benefited from a placebo. I know I have. And yes, afterwards, it's weird. Are you serious? That there was nothing in that? Well, yes, that is how placebos work, and they do work. How's about accounts of grandmothers who are given the strength momentarily, not for long periods of time, but short-term superhuman strength to save a child or a grandchild? There are cases like this. In 1982, in Georgia, in a town called Lawrenceville, there was a woman called Angela Cavallo, and her teenage son, Tony, was working on a 64 Chevy Impala when the car fell off the jacks, or the jacks failed, and the car fell, pinning her son under the car. And this woman actually lifted the car up to allow Tony to scramble to safety. And afterwards, she said, I don't understand. I just knew I had to do it, and I did it. But when they tried afterwards to sort of give her incentives to do it again in front of cameras, she couldn't do it. Yeah, because spiritual realities can impact the body for better or for worse. In Wailua, Hawaii, this was in the year 1988, there was a construction job going on, and they had just finished filming the finale for, do you remember that Hawaii-based show on television, Magnum P.I.? So the guy who was working on that project, he was a Vietnam veteran and helicopter pilot called Steve Cox, and his helicopter, something went wrong. A Hughes 500 helicopter crashed into a drainage dish. His co-worker, a guy called Tiny Everall, lifted the helicopter off enough to allow somebody to pull Cox out of the cockpit. And I just pulled a couple of these things. There are many, many, many accounts. You may have even experienced something in your own life like this. In Tucson, Arizona, a Chevy Camaro hit an 18-year-old called Kyle Holtrust, and the car pinned Holtrust, who was still alive, underneath. Meanwhile, a bystander, Tom Boyle, this was in 2006, 19 years ago, a guy called Tom Boyle lifted the Camaro off the teenager while a bystander pulled the teen to safety. Yeah, look, this is the sort of thing that happened. You know, there are times that you are psyched up with confidence that somehow or another, either through things that have happened to you or through the help of somebody else, possibly, a friend being with you, but somehow or another, you're psyched up with huge confidence on the threshold of a certain project or activity, and you simply know you can't fail. And sure enough, you go ahead and pull it off, and you say afterwards to yourself and I knew this was going to work. I knew I would be able to do it. But at the same time, there are also occasions when we know there's something we have to do and we just feel so fearful about it, so utterly lacking in confidence that we know we're not going to be able to do it. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. So these things are very noteworthy when these events happen, and they're very exciting and very wonderful. But the truth is that just as often or more often, a spiritual thing does not give you momentary superhuman strength. It gives you momentary superhuman weakness. That's sometimes what fear does, and it paralyzes. And because fear is a spiritual force, it fits under the F of faith in the entire 5F project that I use as the foundation for the most effective coaching imaginable. That fear can be combated again only by something spiritual. And that spiritual thing is what? That's right, courage. That is the spiritual power that combats fear. But that's all very well. I mean, that's very nice to say that. But what do? You're experiencing fear about something, and I'll give you an example. It's all very well to say, just defeat it with courage. But, if I could do that, I wouldn't be fearful in the first place. The question is, what do I do that I can do that'll help me overcome the fears that I feel? Well, let me give you a real-life example. Okay, so somebody... And I'm talking about a real-life situation that I've been involved in. Somebody had a really dead-end type of job. And I don't want to say exactly what it is because I think the person may be a regular listener to the podcast, and if you are, you know who you are, but I don't want to say anything that can do anything more to identify you, even to yourself. So I'm not going to say the job. I'm going to give an example. It's a dead-end job. The guy drives a school bus. Okay, and when you say to him, "Why are you doing this? You're in the prime of your productive years. You're in your 30s or 40s. Now is when you should be building up your financial future, and you're driving a bus. You're capable of so much more." He said, "I enjoy it. It gives me time to think. I feel I'm doing something useful. I like the children. I like it. I'm doing what I like doing." Yeah, but you could be earning so much more money, and you should. There is no planet on which you will be happy down the road that you drove a school bus now. And he said, "Well, there's nothing else I can do. I'm not qualified for anything else." And I said, "Well, actually you are. You're able to do a sales job. I will tell you how to find a sales job in a company that has a very good sales manager. who will make sure that you get trained to sell effectively. And his immediate, while I'm talking, his immediate response is, no, I can't sell. I'm not a salesperson. I can't sell. I can't talk people into doing things. And the words tumble over themselves as they pour like a Niagara cascade out of his mouth, all explaining why he could never do sales. All that's really happening, of course, is he's articulating his sheer terror, because sales can be frightening. You know why? Because there is rejection involved, plenty rejection. And I would say to him, yes, and one of the reasons that I recommend that you do sales is because I want you in all aspects of your life to overcome your fear of rejection. It's holding you back in other areas as well. And little by little, he begins to open his heart to this idea of doing something that absolutely terrifies him. But yes, that is the direction he's going to go. So 3 specific things that anybody can do in order to build up courage and defeat fear. Number 1 is to understand that fear is a feeling. It's a bad, destructive feeling. How do you get rid of it? You get rid of it by acting in the way you'd act if you already felt the way you wished you feel. Do you follow what I'm saying? Whistle a happy tune. There's a song about that. Whenever I feel afraid, I whistle a happy tune. There's a lot of truth in that. Whistling past the graveyard. Things scare you, start whistling. Now, I'm not suggesting that whistling is the avenue to follow, but the principle is absolutely correct. Even though you feel fearful, start acting now the way you would act if you already felt the way you would feel, which is courageous and unfearful, not fearful about anything at all. So start acting the way you would act if you already felt the way you wished you'd feel. So act not fearful. Well, I'm not being consistent. Yes, of course. Who told you being consistent is the important thing here? It isn't. Act as if you fear nothing. Go on, act as if you fear. But I am fearful. I'm being hypocritical. Never mind, not the worst sin in the world. The most important thing now is not to allow these silly excuses to deter you from doing what you need to do, which is to act fearless. Number 2 is expose yourself to small doses of exactly the fear that you fear. I call this the vaccine approach, right? This is a person who just got thrown off a horse. First time they went horse riding, got thrown off the horse, and they are now absolutely horrified at the thought of horses. And the wise parent or the wise teacher will do everything they can to make the child get back on the horse, just for a few moments. But that's enough of a vaccine to stop that fear of horses taking hold for the rest of their life. And number 3, try to help someone else overcome whatever fear is paralyzing them. Because while curing someone else, you too will become cured. Try, if you know anybody who is being held back by fear, and you can usually spot them, right? You can see it in yourself, you can spot it in others. And if you have anything of a relationship with that person, tell them that you know what's worrying them and you'd like to help them overcome it. And you work with them. You be their coach. I'm trying to overcome their fears, and you'll be amazed at how much that will do for you as well. And so that, dear happy warriors, is the principle in combating fear, which so seriously degrades our performance and that so dramatically handicaps us and obstructs our forward progress. So work on it, confront your fears, and remember the lesson of on that self-same day, or on the bone of that day, and go for it. Propel yourself forward. Remember to download your own copy of Boost Your Income by going to wehappywarriors.com. If you want to join a community of people who are all busy overcoming their fears and unleashing their true powers, because fear is holding you back from doing what you would do, then just join our Happy Warrior community. If you're not there yet, please do. And if you join the Happy Warrior community, well, then you get access not only to all the other happy warriors who have triumphed in the battles you are standing on the threshold of, but you also get access to material that I prepare specially for people who are operating on an advanced level as a member of the Happy Warrior community. And so, for instance, in today's special bonus podcast, especially for members of the Happy Warrior community, I am dealing with fear, but I'm taking it further into the romantic realm, in the areas in which male-female relationships are handicapped by male fear. Not handicapped by female fear, by the way, interestingly enough. Handicapped by male fear. And I want to talk about how to deal with that. And that awaits you members of the Happy Warrior community. And I hope you find it transformative and powerful in your lives. So until next week, I, your rabbi, remain committed to your growth onwards and upwards in the 5 key fundamental focuses of life: family, finance, fitness, faith, and friendships. God bless.